This is Seventh Generation Warfare, and I'm your current host, John Nelson. In this episode, we'll be looking at the final classification for ReadySide Up. There are 7 classifications we talk about, which are food, water, shelter, security, economics, community, and fitness. And we look at all these in order to protect ourselves against disaster and sudden misfortune, be it personal disaster, natural disaster, or societal disaster. And the point of all this in 7th generation warfare is to protect our will so that these disasters or sudden misfortunes cannot force us into a position where we have to bend our will or accept the will of another over our own in order to get by and survive. So, whatever life throws at you, hopefully you've thought about it ahead of time and put yourself in a position where you can be resilient to it. We're talking readiness, resiliency, and self-reliance are the 3 R's of ReadySide Up. So if you have not watched the other ones, please go back and look at it. This one is about fitness, and more specifically, it's fitness of mind, body, and spirit. And so going into it, just remember this site evaluation that we've been going over is what I use to do readiness reports on several clients I had, and will hopefully continue to do. And so you go through, you ask the people the questions, you can ask yourself these questions, and you try to develop a holistic understanding of their readiness, resiliency, and self-reliance across all the classifications. And the idea is you don't do something too extravagant in one classification before you've built the readiness and resiliency and self-reliance across all the classifications. So build them all up kind of evenly, because if you just focus on one, you have a lot of vulnerabilities, potentially critical vulnerabilities. So getting into it, fitness, age and biological sex might be self-apparent, but as people transition in age, and depending on what their sex might be, this might change the decisions you make in regards to recommendations you make for the people. So, for instance, I did a report for a single elderly lady, was not very physically intimidating because she was in her 60s. She lived alone, and so getting a security, focusing more on building her security posture was important, because if anyone broke into her place, there's no way she could defend herself. They could just take whatever they wanted. So that's just one example of how age and sex would come into it. Continuing on with body fitness, what kind of exercise somebody does, how often, how many times per week they might do it, or they might not do any exercise, in which case you probably want to advise them to start looking out for their physical health and start being active, because if you're not physically fit, you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable position. Not only can, if say economic disaster happened, could you not take a lot of jobs or do a lot of work because you physically can't handle the physical labor of it, but also not moving your body is probably going to bring about other health issues for which then you might need treatment or whatever else. So make sure you're staying active and make sure your physical activity is well rounded. There are the meatheads in the gym who just like to do bench presses and squats, and they think that is a holistic workout, when in fact it's not. You also have people who only run, bike, and swim, and they think that that's a holistic workout. It is not. So making sure that we're looking physically at our health across all the different types of activities you could be doing. What chronic conditions might somebody have? What type? How long? Etc. And next would be mental health issues. What kind of mental health issues somebody might have and how long they might have. Both of these might open cans of worms. especially the mental health issues. You might, when talking with somebody, you might uncover some childhood trauma. But it's important that you help people work through these things, because a lot of mental health issues, I think, are, and I'm not a psychologist, are people have broke their mind because they've lied to themselves a lot, and so helping people see the truth and accept the truth in their life uh, might make them much more apt for dealing with the truth when it smacks them across the face in the future. And then with chronic conditions, you never know what. A lot of people out there are very much under the thumb of the pharmaceutical industry. Not saying that they can just go off medications or whatever, but there might be alternative lifestyle choices, food, diet, sleep, etc., that are leading to their chronic condition in ways they can live in harmony with their chronic condition, or live in a way that their chronic condition doesn't affect them, etc. So with either of these, there's also the potential for medication. There's also the potential for medication for whatever other reason. So that's a question: what medications people are on. You don't want to be reliant on the pharmaceutical industry. A lot of drugs are coming from China. If war happened with China, say, then a lot of drugs would be cut off, and there'd be a lot of crazies running around. So finding alternatives, if there's drugs you can't get off, trying to find alternatives. One example that I come across in my work is thyroid, and I've since forgotten a lot that I've read on it, but basically there is the potential for doing for supplementing thyroid through pig thyroid. You can consume pig thyroid in some manner or another instead of taking whatever the thyroid medication is. I'm not a medical expert. Do all your own research. What types of vitamins and supplements people might be on? I think I also talked about this in the food classification, but you want to understand what people's diets look like when it comes to fitness as well. And if people are supplementing, why are they supplementing? Do they just think that it's necessary in a standard American diet? Or, do they have a standard American diet? Why are they supplementing? What are they supplementing? And how might they find ways to just have a more holistic, healthy diet? Getting more into spiritual fitness, we got vice, bad habits, and addictions. It's kind of hit or miss how much people share with you in this regard. Most people who are addicted to things don't even realize they're addicted. The biggest one would be sugar. No one's walking around saying they're addicted to sugar, but yet almost everyone is. Or coffee. Very few people say they're addicted to coffee, but they probably are. The reason they might not realize that these are addictions is because they're probably more addicted to bigger things such as alcohol, cannabis, sex, other things in their life are more addictive and have a little bit louder of a demon on their shoulder that they haven't addressed, telling them to do it. Same with vice and bad habits. It's kind of all in the same umbrella, but these are all things that could be someone's undoing if not checked. That the demonic whispers could come in and get them to do something bad in order to get whatever substance they're after. Or if tragedy strikes, they might not cope with it in a healthy way, and they might turn to a substance or a behavior in order to cope with it, etc. So next, but also kind of similar, is deadly sins and character flaws. There are 7 deadly sins: greed, sloth, wrath, envy, pride, gluttony, and lust. And so you can see how these things need to be improved. And again, I don't know that people go around thinking what deadly sins am I susceptible to? And unless you know the person really well, you might not be able to identify them either. But at least put the idea in their head that these are things that everyone struggles with. Maybe not to the same degree, but even if you've improved on your deadly sins and you've cut back on a lot of bad habits, there's still something you can improve in your life. There's always something you can improve on in your life, and whether you are asking yourself that or not, it makes all the difference. Because if you're not asking yourself, how can I improve myself? What kind of things should I do away with? What kind of things should I highlight in my life? Then you're probably going to start falling into bad habits again. That's my personal experience, and I'm sticking with that philosophy. Spirituality. What kind of spirituality might somebody have? Religion, etc. But spirituality goes well beyond religion. And you might end up taking a lot of time to discuss this with a person. They might believe something, and you might come to the conclusion they believe it only because they were told again and again and again as a child to believe it, that they might not actually, you might feel like they don't actually believe it. But then you might get other people who believe things that no one else believes, and you don't know how they could have possibly come to that belief, but it seems rational in some sort of way, and everything in between. So assessing one's spirituality, but in regards to look for how it might protect them in sudden misfortune, how it might make them ready for disaster, or have resiliency in disaster. And just because somebody knows, it's more common in organized religion that somebody can regurgitate the talking points, and you might say, wow, yeah, Jesus has got your back, so you don't need to worry. But if they don't truly embody that belief, then it doesn't really mean anything. So trying to really search their soul and see what they really believe. Do they really feel that in this instance Jesus has their back? Just recently I saw a video, because I follow some Muslims on YouTube. I saw a video, and it was of a Palestinian whose house was allegedly destroyed by an Israel bomb or whatever, and he was thanking God. He was thanking God that he was okay, and he said, no worries about the material possessions and all this. God willing, I will be able to build back all that I had. That guy's a believer. So if somebody is that strong in their belief that they can walk out of a bomb building and say, oh, thank God I'm okay, nothing else to worry about, then that person's in pretty good spiritual position. Entertainment. How much time somebody spends on entertainment. I see entertainment as, to obtain the mind, entertainment mind. And it's really just a distraction from one's own thoughts. That's kind of how I see it. I wouldn't necessarily go out forthright and say this to people that I'm interviewing, but trying to get a sense of what they might do for entertainment, how they relax, etc. Maybe you get the sense that they really don't like to be in their own thoughts and their own mind, so they constantly need distraction, and this will tell you a little bit about their spiritual position as well. Philosophy. So much like spirituality, what are their beliefs? Philosophy is supposedly more objective of beliefs. So, but still in the same regard, philosophy can help in the same way spirituality can, to protect you against the sudden misfortune. So what do you believe, and why do you believe it? And that goes to epistemology. When looking at philosophy, I like to look at four main classifications of philosophy. There's metaphysics, which is one's basic understanding of the nature of reality. There's epistemology, and that is the study of how you know what you know. So, for instance, I like to come to knowledge by um, personal experience and reason, not just a lot of people say evidence and reason and evidence. I think it needs to be personal experience and reason or logic. Some people just say they believe things based on faith, and so you would have to ask them what faith means. So beyond metaphysics and epistemology, there is ethics, and that is one's moral code. And you can ask people about their moral code and how they come to know what's right and wrong. And then the fourth and final one is politics. A lot of modern society in America, just all they really care about is politics. They negate that that's kind of the final step. Their ethics should be driving their politics, and their metaphysics and epistemology should be driving their ethics. So a lot of people will probably be putting the cart before the horse on that one. What kind of medical experience somebody might have? It could be anything from personal disaster of, you're walking on a street and your kid gets hit by a car or something horrible like that, or it's a total SHTF situation and a random gang of people is pumping your house full of bullets and somebody gets shot inside. What kind of medical treatment might you have in order to save yourself and loved ones, or strangers for that matter, in your neighborhood should the situation arise? Because talking about readiness and resiliency and self-reliance, like nothing would be more horrible than to just watch somebody die in front of you because you don't have the skills. So if you don't have the skills, there are basic first aid classes and stuff you can take for very cheap. Something like that could be recommended. I also ask people about military and paramilitary experience. Why do I ask people about military and paramilitary? Both, like military and cops and firefighters to some degree, go through some sort of shit test in order to gain entry. So if somebody has made it into the military, that they have a certain level of dealing with hazing and harassment and bullshit. Talking about basic training. Now, basic training isn't really all that tough. It's made so that most people will be able to pass it, but at least you have some objective standard of what they might be able to deal with. Also, and potentially more importantly, military and paramilitary organizations follow very specifically a hierarchy or a chain. So people with military experience will know how to shut up and color when the time comes. So if if there an opportunity arises where you need clear command, and somebody can step up and take that command, and you can delegate orders to military people, they're probably going to be pretty good at executing it, because they're trained not to really question the person giving the commands. If that person's a superior or perceived superior, their job is to go ahead and execute that order. So that's why military and paramilitary experience might be valuable. Also, with that, there are tons of jobs and skills people have in the military that don't end up translating to everyday life, and you might be surprised at what kind of skills somebody might have. I also ask people about whether or not they have, say, medical power of attorney. I think under economics, I ask about will and trust. So this is kind of just a continuation of that. Medical power of attorney. Ask that in fitness, because if you're in a coma, who's making the decisions on your fitness on your behalf? Uh, Another thing I ask people is whether or not they do any kind of journaling or writing or anything to get their thoughts out of their head onto paper. And I think that can have some sort of therapeutic experience or a therapeutic attribute to it. So I ask people about that. Um, I ask people about the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where they might position themselves on there. And again, you're probably not, a self-assessment probably is not all that great, but some people will surprise you with some of their answers when it's surprisingly low or whatever. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs are survival, security, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. And some people who you think are totally squared away will, especially in my experience, women will say, "Oh no, I'm kind of stuck on belonging. I don't feel like I belong," or something, that they're struggling to be seen with esteem in the community. So they're still trying to get that sense of belonging. So that goes to the spiritual fitness and how one sees oneself. And so perhaps doing things to making recommendations on things that they could do to help bolster their self-confidence or something like that. And last in the fitness classification, I like to talk about the 6 levels of emotional maturity. And I should have pulled these up because they are a little bit complicated. But in short, they are emotional responsibility. That basically, I think that's that you own your emotions. That it's not somebody else's your emotions are not somebody else's responsibility. Somebody else didn't make you feel a certain way. Emotional honesty is honesty of like why you might feel that way. If you have an emotion, there's an underlying cause, and being able to identify that. Emotional openness would be the ability to share what you feel and why you feel it. Emotional assertiveness. Oh gosh, it's been such a long time since I've gone over some of this stuff. And you can look up the 6 levels of emotional maturity. I think emotional assertiveness is standing firm that you have the right to feel what you feel. Emotional understanding, and then emotional detachment. Ultimately, I think emotional detachment never really quite sat right with me. Maybe I'm struggling with it, but basically that your emotions aren't really you anyways. And there's some true to that, but I think our emotions tell us a lot about what we are doing in our life and how we are setting ourselves up for success or failure. So I think it's very important to listen to your emotions. But yeah, not get hung up when you're feeling sad. Don't get too hung up on the fact that you're feeling sad. Just know that this emotion will pass too, and I'll be happy in the future, and I'll probably forget that I was sad or something like that. So, but that wraps up the fitness classification for the ReadySide Up site evaluation. If you're interested in getting the whole site evaluation, I will leave contact information in the comments or this description of the video, and you can email me and I can send this all out to you. But until the next video, there is one more video I'll be going over with this site evaluation, which is what I call the home invasion package, where we look at one's property and one's position and help protect somebody against home invasion. But until then, I hope you have enjoyed the ReadySide Up content. Please go back and watch the entire playlist because I think there's a lot of good information in there. And like I said, you should be building your readiness, resiliency, and self-reliance holistically. Don't just be the gun guy with 50 guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition and neglect to understand what your level of emotional security is, or don't forget to put a will into place, um, or don't forget a clean water source, something like that. Pretty simple. Anyways, have a good night.